Hello and welcome to this Magicka Nightblade setup guide for the Maelstrom Arena. If you haven't seen my previous video setup guide, I strongly recommend you check it out. The link's in the description below, as this guide will simply be just an update on the previous video. I won't be touching on everything in the build, but only the things that I've changed. Let's have a look at our skills to begin with. As you can see, the main primary bar hasn't really changed much. The only thing of comment to make is that the inner light ability, due to its recent change, is really strong now due to you can buff the empower before wave spawns. So for example, if you buff your inner light, you could do a really nice strong heavy attack, or if you time it with a proxy going off, you can get that extra damage on the proxy. Just a really nice change that they've added in terms of wave spawning in PvE. Really powerful thing to just buff it before the wave spawns will help the wave get off to a nice start by you being able to kill a mob very quickly. On the off bar, we've removed rapid regeneration and replaced it with refreshing path. Refreshing path is a brilliant dot and hot that you can place before combat, and on some key bosses you will also need to replace the refreshing path throughout the fight. I often don't refresh this depending on the boss, it just depends on how much damage is coming, but it's also really nice because it's a shadow ability which is buffs your armor and spell resistance. There is an alternative setup that I haven't yet gone to on this build, just because I'm not too comfortable with it yet. If you have a Maelstrom Destro staff available to you, you can place Elemental Blockade on the first bar and move Crippling Grasp onto the off bar in replacement of Inner Light. In this way you keep your your Impale on the main bar, which allows you to have the highest execute damage that's available to you in this build, as well as giving you the extra drop for increased single target damage over time, as well as providing an extra little bit of cleave AoE beyond the refreshing path and proximity detonation that are already on this build. As I said, I'm not too comfortable with this build yet just because I haven't had Crippling Grasp ever on my off bar. However, this setup will deal higher damage as you're adding an extra ability that increases your weaving damage, and not only that, but because you're increasing your impale damage by not having the impale on the off bar and instead Crippling Grasp on the off bar. The way that this build's rotation will work will be simply funnel health weaving, mixing in your merciless resolves whenever it's procced, making sure your blockades of fire are kept up, and then when you're switching to the off bar you're going to be rebuffing your proxy whenever it's exploded. See, what you'll do is you'll be rebuff your proxy, and if you need to do that you'll rebuff your refreshing path in some instances as well. And the most important thing is before you switch bars you'll always reapply the Crippling Grasp. So in essence you'll be switching to your off bar every 8 seconds, but more importantly it's always important to keep the Crippling Grasp as the last ability you click, as it has an initial damage, and if you change the bars fast enough the initial damage will be hit with the spell damage that is currently on the main bar. As you're using a Maelstrom Destro and a Maelstrom Resto staff, this means that the spell damage bonus from the Destoration staff will be actually applied as opposed to not applied if you're on the Resto staff bar. If we just quickly have a look at the character sheet, you will be able to see that I'm using the twice one star set at the moment. I currently prefer this to solo, as I'm also doing trials a lot, in which I drop my health a little bit lower than you can see on my character sheet at the moment. At the moment I often use Julianos for trials, and that's why the character sheet shows that I have such a higher health amount with twice one star. If I was purely focusing on solo content, I would strongly consider dropping the maximum health pool down to about 18.5k with the twice one star set. I just prefer it all round at the moment as opposed to Julianos for solo content, just simply because it also gives you that small amount of stamina pool bonus as well. Having a quick look at the armor sets, as you can see, and as I previously suggested on the previous video, I'm using two-piece Kenner. Two-piece Kenner is a really strong DPS increase, and I can't imagine it without it now on the build. Having used an Orion F in the past was more of a safety measure, as well as providing a nice amount of AoE, but with the choice of using proximity detonation and refreshing path on the build, I don't feel I need any more AoE than I've already got on the build. As I said already, I'm using twice one star nowadays. It's simply just a convenience measure. If you prefer using Julianos, there's no problem in that. I simply use it as it's easier to go between the Julianos with the lower health and the twice one star with the higher health pool between trials and solo content with greater flexibility. However, I still remain vigilant that if you use Spell Power Cure on the chest, sash, shoes, legs and gloves, if it's available to you, this will be a lot stronger than either of the two sets. So once again, if you have Spell Power Cure available to you, that would be the better alternative. As usual, we'll use Willpower with 3 enchanted with spell damage, and as I'm lucky enough now, I do have a Maelstrom Inferno Staff Imprecise. I would actually recommend you get a sharpened one, but for the sake of what I have, I'm using a precise one. And of course on the off bar you have a Maelstrom Restoration Staff. Now into the bit that everyone is most interested with in the build, we'll go into our champion points. My current distribution is done based off quite a little bit of math, but as I said, I haven't fully invested a full amount of time to make sure this is a point perfect, but for the time being this is near enough perfect, and I'm quite happy with it until I find the time to do the full maths behind exactly how many champion points. As I imagine, it will only change ever so slightly between what I have now and after I've done the more elongated maths behind the build. I have 3 points in Blessed just for that little boost in healing. This is really nice in 12 man, but also particularly in Maelstrom, as that tiny little extra boost in healing is always nice for the few points that you spend in it. The 40 points in Elfborn are really nice due to thanks to all the crit gains that you've got on the build, as well as if you're running twice one star, it synergizes really nicely with that. Not to mention that with all the buffs on your dots now, your dot damage when it crits will now also go far higher, so that's quite nice to have on the build. As usual, you need to spec a large amount into Elemental Expert due to the changes in Formatage, so now you have a greater damage with Flame, Frost, Shock and Magic, which increases your weaving damage as well as all your magic spells damage. Not to mention that I have a few points in Spell Erosion. I would argue that you might be able to put 1 or 2 more into Spell Erosion, but according to my equation that I shouldn't actually stack too heavily in this, but I do, as I said, need to do a little bit more maths before I come up with a finalised version of how many CP should go into each tree. I have 3 points in Staff Expert, as light attack weaving is one of the key fundamentals if you're using Kenna, as well as in any build. Light attack weaving always ranks rather highly on the DPS. I couldn't recommend enough you just put a few points into this. I would recommend 3 as I just find it the most useful. It seems to boost my damage enough, but not to the extent where I'm overstacking into it. And finally for the blue points we have 45 into Formatage. As you know, the changes in Formatage now increase dot damage, and dot damage is rather strong in this game for most PvE builds. So with the things like Crippling Grasp, Proximity Detonation, Refreshing Path, and if you choose to use it, Wall of Elements on the build, not to mention the fact you'll also be using Ice Comet as your ultimate, it's just really strong to boost all those dot damages, and I'm now pulling anywhere from about 28k if I'm slacking all the way up to about 35k depending on the duration and amount of ads of the fight. If we just take a look at the red trees, we have 30 into Spell Shield. This is just to simply get us the phase passive, which is kind of nice in Maelstrom just to get that bit of armor as we dodge roll, as well as being quite nice to boost your spell resistance by a small amount. I also have a heavily weighted split into Hardy and Elemental Defender. More points in Hardy because I feel like the cloth user is more weak to physical damage due to its lower armor, so therefore the higher stack in physical damage is often more helpful. The spell resistance is already high enough and the Elemental Defender is just a bonus to this. As you can see, I've also got a tiny amount into Light Armor Focus. This is just to even out the champion points a bit more. You might want to take a few out of Light Armor Focus and put them into Elemental Defender depending on how hard you feel like you're getting hit. And finally I've got 12 points into Quick Recovery just for that nice little self boost to healing that you might want to help your healers with if you're in 12 man content, or for Maelstrom just to help heal yourself that little bit more, as you only have 2 heal over times on the bar. Finally, as previously shown in the previous video, I have 67 into Magician and 100 in Alchemist. I would strongly recommend these two as the best pairings you can do for your green champion points. However, you may prefer a slight mix between going fewer into Alchemist and more into Magician, but personally I prefer this bit as I feel like the Magicka recovery is far more important than Magicka cost reduction, and maths has shown that it's pretty wise to do it like this way. You can probably reduce the Arcanist amount by a small amount and put some more into Magician in order to make the maths probably be better, but for the time being I'm quite happy with the split, and I certainly see no reason, given my sustainability, to min-max the build even further. So yeah, there's just a few things that have changed really. As I said, DPS in this patch has increased a lot, so Maelstrom Arena feels a lot easier with this build, and as I said, I'm still hunting for those elusive 2 pieces of Spell Power Cure that I'm still missing, having despite running numerous runs. I did get my Maelstrom Inferno staff, but that's how the build stands now. This is what I would deem the best build to be. Just some further comments about Maelstrom Nightblade builds before I end the video. I have been trying dual wield and restoration staff, which is something I saw on a friend's video. It's rather tough and I wouldn't recommend it. It feels like the DPS is lost as opposed to gained. You can get some very nice burst DPS on your off bar, but in general the build feels weaker and less viable, particularly as you can't actually charge any form of heavy attack before a mob spawn, slowing your kills of rounds, and although you can increase the damage in the execute phase by having a higher impale damage by using dual wield and a higher proximity detonation, it doesn't really feel too worthwhile. I've also been messing around with Sap Essence a little bit. Sap Essence is a viable alternative to Refreshing Path in some rounds, it just depends on the round that you're in. If you were truly trying to speedrun this, you would alternate between Sap Essence and Refreshing Path, but for the time being, when I'm just trying to set a number 1 before actually min-maxing to the greatest extent, I will then min-max upon getting number 1, feeling the leisure to play around with having to swap bars all the way through Maelstrom. For the time being, I'm just simply trying to get to A to B as quickly as possible, as opposed to getting it to A to B as possible, and in addition to that, killing everything as quickly as possible, with the thought of knowing in each instance of each round where I need sap and where I need refreshing. Largely in general, a good rule to follow is Sap Essence is pretty good on the rounds where you'll experience more than 3 mobs. A particular round would that be the beginning of round 3 on arena number 7, which is the Poison Arena. There's several mobs that come at you in quick succession, too quickly for a proxy, and you do too slow a damage with Refreshing Path. That'd be a good point where you would switch to Sap Essence, but for something on a boss, for example, it's far better to have Refreshing Path, not only because of the armor buff, but just because the heal over time and the damage over time is far stronger on a single target. With that being said, thank you very much for watching this build video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Take care, and thank you for watching.